The bruise bloomed under her sleeve before the plane ever left the ground. Camille Sterling is Black, 28, the executive assistant who ran an empire from a marble terminal floor. Passports, contracts, every detail smoothed before anyone asked. For 4 years, she managed the world of Kang Tae-jun, the Korean Mafia man they call the Quiet One. The black serpent inked up the left side of his neck, a steel watch on a still wrist. She stood in her tailored suit, while Victoria Whitmore, his girlfriend in couture cream, corrected her out loud, called her the help. Camille absorbed it with a firm smile. Then Victoria followed her into the empty terminal restroom, cornered her, and when Camille finally spoke with dignity, a manicured hand struck her across the face. She fixed her hair, smoothed her blouse, boarded the jet without looking at a single soul, certain she would be the one discarded. But on that plane, Tae-jun read her silence, the way he reads a room. He halted the takeoff. He knocked. She said she was fine, and when the door opened and he saw her tear-filled eyes, the man who never shows a flicker of emotion asked 3 words nobody had heard him ask before. Before starting the story, comment down below where you are watching from and what time it is there. If stories of karma, love, and hidden truths move you, leave a like, be sure to subscribe to the channel, and click join to become a member and help our channel. The passport was in the wrong hand, and Camille noticed before anyone else did. She crossed the marble in 4 steps, took it from the young steward without breaking his rhythm, and slid it into the leather folder where it belonged, under the tab marked with Mr. Sterling's name. No one saw the swap. That was the point. The VIP terminal held 11 people that morning, and Camille was tracking all of them. 2 parents near the window, a pilot checking his watch by the glass doors, 3 ground staff who kept looking to her for the next instruction, a driver still hauling the last of the luggage, and Victoria, seated with her legs crossed, sunglasses pushed up into platinum hair, a white bag balanced on her knee like a small pet. Camille went to the parents first. "Water's chilled, both bottles," she said, kneeling to Mrs. Sterling's chair. "Your neck pillow is in the blue tote, front pocket. The pilot says 9 minutes." Mrs. Sterling patted her hand. "You think of everything." "That's the job." She stood, and her spine came up straight, and the vibrant tailored trousers moved with her like they'd been cut in the room. The blouse was pressed. The folder was tucked against her ribs. 4 years, and she had never once boarded a plane out of order. "Camille," Victoria's voice carried across the marble, "the contracts. In the folder, ready for signature at cruise. I asked to see them now." Camille turned, kept the smile where it lived, at the corners, controlled. "Of course." She walked the folder over. Victoria didn't take it. She let Camille hold it open in the air between them, flipping to the tabbed page with 2 fingers, while she read at her leisure and let the silence stretch so the ground staff could feel it. "This is the old draft," Victoria said. "It's the current one. Legal sent it Thursday." "It's the old one." Victoria closed the folder against Camille's hands, gently, the way you'd close a book you were bored of. "Honestly, I don't know why we let the help handle documents." The word landed in the marble room and sat there. One of the ground staff looked at his shoes. The steward froze mid-step. Mr. Sterling, by the window, turned his head a degree, then turned it back, because it was easier not to have seen. Camille felt the heat come up her throat, and she did not let it reach her face. She lowered the folder. She squared it against her forearm. "I'll pull the signed version from the server so you can compare," she said. 2 minutes. "Do that." Camille walked to the standing desk by the charging station, opened the tablet, and found the document in 9 seconds because she had labeled the folders herself. She turned the screen so Victoria could see the timestamp. Thursday, 4:14 p.m., the current draft. Victoria glanced at it and looked away as though it had never mattered. "Fine. Load it for signing." "Already loaded." Then why did you show me the wrong? Victoria stopped. She smiled instead, the smile that showed teeth and stayed clear of the eyes. You're flustered this morning. Take a breath, Camille. We wouldn't want mistakes. There had been no mistake. Both of them knew it. That was the design of the thing, and Camille had learned its shape a long time ago. You build a small hole, you push the other person toward it, and if they step around it, you say they nearly fell in. Understood, Camille said, and went to check the luggage count. 14 pieces. She counted them twice, tags facing out, and confirmed the driver had the 2 carry cases that never went in the hold. Mrs. Sterling's medication, and Mr. Sterling's reading glasses, 3 spare pairs, because he lost them. She had packed those herself at 5 that morning. She had also packed the charger the pilot would ask for, and the anti-nausea tablets Victoria took without ever admitting she got airsick, and the specific brand of sparkling water that was the only one Victoria would drink, which Camille sourced from a supplier 2 districts over and never mentioned, because the point of the job was that nothing was ever mentioned. Things simply worked. When they worked, no one thanked her. When they didn't, everyone remembered. The glass doors opened and a man came through, and the temperature of the room changed. Kang Tae-jun did not announce himself. He never did. He came in with his hands loose at his sides and his eyes already moving, taking the terminal apart in a single pass. The luggage, the pilot, the parents, the seated blonde, and last, briefly, the woman by the standing desk with a folder against her ribs. His gaze touched Camille and moved on, the way it always moved on, and she went back to the count. Behind him, Han Do-yoon held the door, scanning the lot beyond the glass before he let it close. We're ahead of schedule, Tae-jun said. Not to anyone, to the room. 8 minutes to boarding, Camille answered, because she was the one who tracked minutes. Documents are loaded, both cars are clear, your parents are settled. He nodded once. That was the whole exchange. In 4 years, she had learned that his silence was not distance, it was economy. He said the thing that needed saying and stopped. Most people filled the rest with noise. He let it stay empty, and the empty space made everyone around him careful. Victoria rose from her chair when she saw him, and her whole body reorganized. The sunglasses came down off her hair and hung from one finger. The smile changed shape, warmer now, aimed. She crossed to him with the white bag swinging. You're early, she said, touching his arm. I thought you had the call with Seoul. Moved it. For me? He looked at her hand on his sleeve. For the schedule. Victoria laughed like it was a joke they shared, and steered him toward the window, toward his parents, talking as she went, about the villa, the water, the dinner she'd arranged for the second night. Camille turned away and gave the pilot the fuel confirmation he'd been waiting for, and told the steward which cooler went on first, and knelt one more time to check that Mrs. Sterling's pillow was where she'd said it was. You didn't eat, Mrs. Sterling said quietly. I'll eat on the plane. You always say that, and I always do. She didn't. Mrs. Sterling knew it. There was a small kindness in the woman's face, the kind that came from noticing, and Camille let herself hold it for 1 second before she stood and went back to work, because a second was all she could afford and still keep everything in the air. She had built this. That was the thing she came back to when the marble got cold under her. She had not been handed the Sterling account. She had earned it, one impossible morning at a time, until the family stopped hiring anyone else, because no one else could hold the whole thing in their head at once. She knew Mr. Sterling took his coffee at exactly 60 degrees and would send it back at 58 without knowing why. She knew Mrs. Sterling's cardiologist by first name and had his number in 3 places. She knew which contracts Tae-jun read twice and which he signed on trust, and she knew, this was the part she never said out loud, that the trust extended, quietly. He handed her things without instructions. He assumed she'd already thought of it. In 4 years, he had never once checked her work. That was worth more than the salary. She'd have traded a raise for it any day. That specific weightless feeling of being relied on by a man who relied on no one. Camille, Victoria, again. The itinerary. Print it. It's digital, synced to all your devices. I want it printed. Of course. There was a small printer behind the desk. Camille sent the file, and while it warmed up, Victoria kept talking, not to her, over her, to Taejun across the room. She insists on doing everything on screens, Victoria said, pitching it light, amused. I keep telling her, some of us like paper, but you can't retrain them past a certain point. Them. Camille pulled the warm page from the tray and squared it and walked it over and held it out, and this time Victoria took it, glanced at it, and set it face down on the arm of the chair like something already used. Thank you, Victoria said, and the thank you was worse than the silence would have been, because it was performed, and everyone heard it be performed. Taejun's eyes came up from his phone. They went to the printed page on the chair arm. They went to Camille, who was already turning away with her expression fixed, and they stayed on her back a half-second longer than his eyes usually stayed on anything. He didn't say a word. Camille felt the look and didn't turn. She had a rule about that. You don't check whether he saw. If he saw, it changed nothing, because he wasn't going to choose the assistant's dignity over the girlfriend's comfort, and expecting him to would be the beginning of the kind of mistake she couldn't undo. She kept the rule the way she kept everything, silently, completely, in a place no one could reach to break it. 6 minutes, she said to the pilot. The luggage started moving. The steward wheeled the first cooler toward the jet bridge, and Camille went ahead of him to prop the door and confirm the cabin temperature, because Mrs. Sterling's hands got cold, and Mr. Sterling ran hot, and the two of them had to be seated at the front and the back for exactly that reason, and she had already told the crew, and she confirmed it again anyway. When she came back inside, Victoria had risen and was standing very close to Taejun. Her voice dropped to the private register, one hand flat on his chest. Whatever she said made him look at her for a long moment. He didn't answer. He rarely answered her the way she wanted. Camille had watched this too, over 4 years. The way Victoria pressed and Taejun held still. The way she filled his silences with meaning he had not put there. It was not Camille's business. She had made a career out of things not being her business. Passports, Camille said to the room, because it was time. I have all 5, Mr. and Mrs. Sterling, Miss Whitmore, Mr. Kang, and the crew manifest is with the pilot. You have mine? Victoria's head turned. In the folder, 2nd tab. I want to hold my own passport. Of course. Camille opened the folder, slid the passport free, and offered it. Victoria took it and inspected it, actually inspected it, opened it to the photo page, checked the expiry, as though Camille might have swapped it for a forgery, and then held it out again. Put it back. I don't want to carry it. That's your job. Camille took it back, slid it into the 2nd tab, closed the folder. Her hands were steady. She made sure her hands were steady, because the hands were the thing people watched when they were looking for the crack. You handle her well, Mr. Sterling said, low, appearing at her shoulder with his reading glasses in his hand. The wrong pair, the scratched pair, and she'd have the right ones ready before he asked. Better than I would. She's under stress. Travel does that. That's generous. It's the job, Camille said, for the 3rd time that morning, and this time she heard how the phrase had become a wall she stood behind. She handed him the good glasses. He blinked at them, surprised the way he was always surprised, and put the scratched pair in his pocket. 4 minutes, she said. Victoria's voice rose again, bright and public. Camille, before we board, the seating. I don't want to be next to the window. I told you last time. You're in the aisle. Seat 2A is yours. Aisle side, as requested. You said that last time, and I ended up at the window. That was a different aircraft. This one's configured to your preference. Camille pulled the cabin diagram on the tablet and turned it. Aisle, here. Victoria looked at the screen. There was nothing to argue with, so she found the next thing. And the temperature. It was freezing last time. You never think about these details. Camille thought about the details in her sleep. She had confirmed the cabin temperature 90 seconds ago with her own hand on the vent. I've set it 2 degrees warmer than standard. If it's cold, tell the steward and he'll adjust it live. I'm telling you now. Understood. 2 degrees warmer. Done. It was already done. It had been done before Victoria thought to ask. That was the whole architecture of the work. To have solved the problem before it was raised, so that raising it was theater, and to let the theater happen anyway, and to say understood, and to move on. Camille had performed this exact choreography 1,000 times. It cost her something small each time. She had a place she kept the small costs, and the place had been getting fuller lately, and she did not look inside it, because looking inside it was not part of the job either. Han Do-yoon crossed the marble to the desk and set a single sheet in front of Taejun. Camille caught the movement without turning toward it. She had learned the security chief's rhythms the way she'd learned everyone's. The shaved head bent, the gloved hand flat on the paper, the earpiece he touched when a car arrived early or left late. He never spoke to her. He nodded, once, when she got something right, and the nod was rarer than a raise. She'd earned 3 in 4 years. She kept count of those, too. Camille, Mrs. Sterling, from her chair, quiet under the noise. Sit with me on the flight, just for a while. I'll be up and down the cabin, but I'll try. You always say you'll try. And sometimes I manage it. She smoothed the older woman's collar, a thing that didn't need smoothing, and did it because the woman liked to be touched with care, and no one else in the family remembered that. The small costs went into their place. The place stayed shut. She had gotten very good at keeping it shut. The pilot lifted a hand. Ready. We're boarding, Camille announced. Mr. and Mrs. Sterling first, please. Take your time on the bridge. There's a lip at the threshold. She went to Mrs. Sterling and offered her arm, and the older woman took it, and they went out through the glass together into the covered bridge, slow, unhurried, Camille matching her pace exactly. At the threshold she said, "Step," and Mrs. Sterling stepped, and there was no lip anymore, because Camille had said there was one, and so the woman had lifted her foot. Small, invisible, the whole job. She handed Mrs. Sterling to the steward at the cabin door and turned to go back for the rest, and Victoria was right there in the bridge behind her, close, the white bag on her shoulder and the sunglasses back down over her eyes so you couldn't read them. "Camille," Victoria said, and the public brightness was gone from her voice, now that they were alone in the tunnel, replaced with something flatter and lower. A word. Before we're all trapped in a metal tube together. Camille glanced back toward the terminal glass. Taejun was still inside, at the desk, reading something Han Do-yoon had put in front of him, his back half turned. The parents were already aboard, the crew was forward, it was just the two of them, in the gray light of the bridge, and the engines starting their low build somewhere below. "We're boarding, Miss Whitmore. Whatever it is, I can..." "It's not going to wait." Victoria took off the sunglasses. Her eyes were pale and steady and entirely awake. "Come here, where they can't see. This won't take long." And she stepped back, off the bridge, through a side door into the empty corridor that ran toward the terminal's private restrooms, and she held the door, and she waited for Camille to follow. The corridor smelled of bleach and cold air. Camille let the side door swing shut behind her and followed the sound of heels on tile, past a supply cart, past a folded velvet rope, to the women's restroom at the end where the light hummed a half-tone too bright. Victoria was already inside. She stood between the mirrors and the row of sinks, one hand flat on the marble, waiting the way people wait when they've decided the conversation ahead is one they'll win. "Close it," Victoria said. Camille closed it. She had 11 minutes. She had a passport in the leather folder under her arm and a woman on the jet who'd asked her to sit close during the climb. She calculated the distance back to the bridge in steps, and then she stopped calculating and looked at the woman in front of her. "I don't like how you handle yourself out there," Victoria said. "You've mentioned that. In front of the Kangs, in front of his family. His parents aren't here yet." Camille kept her voice level, the way she kept everything level. "Only your bag, your water, and your itinerary, which you asked me to print." Victoria smiled. The smile didn't travel. "You think you're clever. I think we're going to miss the window. That was the wrong thing, or the right one." Victoria came off the marble in one motion and crossed half the room, and the heels struck the tile like something being nailed down. She stopped a foot away, close enough that Camille could smell the perfume she'd approved 3 months ago from a list of 4. "Let me tell you what you are," Victoria said. "You carry the bags, you hold the passports, you come when someone calls a name, and the name they call is not yours, because your name doesn't matter on that plane. You are the help. You have always been the help. And in about 10 minutes you're going to walk back out there and remember it." The light hummed. Somewhere past the door, a luggage cart rolled and faded. For 4 years, Camille had let this land and slide off. She had a place for it, a closed place, and she'd built the place herself so it would hold weight. She felt the familiar motion start, the reflex to fold the words small and put them away and keep the schedule moving. She didn't fold it. "I built the Sterling account," Camille said. Victoria blinked. "When I came on, they'd churned 3 assistants in 2 years. Mrs. Sterling wouldn't fly. Mr. Sterling wouldn't sign anything he hadn't read twice. There was no system. There was no trust. I built both. 4 years. Every mile of it." She held the folder a little tighter and did not raise her voice. "I know what temperature he takes his coffee, and I know why the last person didn't. That's not the help. That's the reason this trip happens at all. I'm not finished." She'd never said those words to Victoria. She heard them leave her mouth and kept going before the room could close over them. "You've never built anything. You inherited a surname and a table you sit at, and you spend the difference reminding people who don't have one. Whitmore isn't a career. It's an address. You've been living off it since before I met you." Victoria's face did something Camille had never seen it do. The composure cracked at the edges, not into tears, into something older and uglier that the composure had been built to hide. Her jaw worked. A vein stood up thin at her temple. "You don't get to say that to me. You followed me in here. You will apologize. For what's true." The hand came fast. Camille didn't see it start. She saw the mirror tilt, felt the marble edge of the sink press her hip as her weight shifted, and then the heat arrived. A bright, flat sting spreading across her cheekbone up toward the eye, and the sound of it hung in the room a half-second behind the pain. Her head had turned with the blow. Her hair swung across her face, a heavy dark curtain of it, and settled. She stayed exactly where she was. The folder had not left her arm. She noticed that first, the way she noticed inventory. The folder was fine. The passport was fine. Her earring had come loose, and she caught it against her jaw before it fell, and pressed it back into place with 2 fingers. Victoria stood with her hand still half-raised, staring at it, as if it had acted without her. The crack in her face widened for one instant into something close to fear, and then it closed, and the composure came back down like a shutter. Neither of them moved for a moment. The tap dripped once into the basin. A voice on the terminal PA rose and fell somewhere beyond the wall, calling a name that wasn't theirs, and the ordinary sound of it made the room feel more sealed, not less. "You made me do that," Victoria said. Camille lifted her eyes to the mirror. Her cheek had gone hot, and would go red, and then it would bloom into something a foundation could not fully carry. The left side, toward the window seat, away from the aisle. She cataloged it the way she cataloged everything, and the cataloging was the only thing holding her together, so she let it hold. Her ears were ringing, a thin high note under the hum of the light, and she waited for it to pass before she trusted herself to speak again. Her pulse was up in her throat where she could feel it against the collar. She breathed against it, once, slow, and pushed it back down where it belonged. "I didn't make you do anything," she said. "You chose it. You'll want to remember that." Victoria's mouth tightened. She hadn't expected that either. She'd expected a hand to a cheek and a woman coming apart. And instead, she had a woman standing straight against a sink, telling her what she'd chosen, and it clearly unsettled her more than any tears would have. "You should go first," Camille said. Her voice came out lower than she meant it to, but it did not shake. "They'll wonder if we come out together." Victoria studied her, looking, Camille understood, for the thing she'd want to see. Tears, a plea, the old shape of the woman who folded. She gave her none of it. "You won't say anything," Victoria said. It wasn't a threat yet. It was a question wearing a threat's clothes. Camille thought about the plane, about Mrs. Sterling in the front seat with her neck pillow and her pills sorted into the little Sunday through Saturday box, about Mr. Sterling reading with the third pair of glasses, about the man who signed nothing he hadn't read twice, and the woman beside him who had chosen this, and about the man in the dark suit at the desk who had looked at her back a half-second too long and said nothing, because men like that always said nothing, and the nothing was the whole world she had learned to live inside. She thought, "He will not choose the assistant over the girlfriend. No one ever has. That is the rule, and I wrote the rule so it wouldn't surprise me." "There's nothing to say," Camille said. It was the truth as she believed it. If she named this, there would be a version and a counterversion, and the counterversion would be spoken by the woman whose ring the family expected, and Camille would be the woman who carries the bags making an accusation she couldn't survive. She had done the math on humiliations for 4 years. This one didn't add up in her favor. Better to swallow it whole. Better to be the one who absorbed. She'd always been the one who absorbed. Victoria's shoulders dropped a fraction. Relief. Now she turned to the mirror, checked her own face, smoothed the front of her dress with the flat of her hand, and the woman who reassembled herself in the glass was flawless again, was couture and diamonds, and a smile in reserve, and there was no sign anywhere on her of what her hand had just done. "Fix your hair," Victoria said, almost kind now, the way a person is kind when they've won. "You look a mess." She pulled the door open, and the corridor sound rushed in, the luggage cart, a distant announcement, the ordinary machinery of departure, and then the door side shut, and Camille was alone with the hum of the light. She let out one breath, just one. Then she turned to the mirror and went to work, because that was the only direction she knew how to move. The cheek was worse than she'd hoped, a red heat rising along the bone, the beginning of a shadow beneath the eye where the ring had caught. She wet a paper towel under the cold tap and pressed it to the skin and counted, and while she counted, she took the small zip pouch from the inner pocket of the folder, the one she carried for Mrs. Sterling's touch-ups, for the coffee that spilled, for the 1,000 small repairs a trip required, and she opened the compact and worked the color into the mark with the pad of her ring finger, light, then lighter, building it the way she'd learned to build everything, in patient layers no one would see the work of. Her hand was steady. She made it steady. She looked at the steadiness in the mirror and used it as proof that she was fine, because if the hand was steady, then the rest of her could be filed under managing. Under the layers, the mark still showed if the light caught it wrong. She turned her face left, then right, checking it the way she'd check a stain on a lapel before a meeting, and she found the angle where it disappeared and memorized which angle it was. Aisle side, clean. She would keep her chin a degree toward the window, and no one would find it. She had spent 4 years learning how a person could be looked at and still not be seen. She knew exactly how much of a face a busy cabin actually registered, which was almost none, if the woman gave them nothing to register. She thought, briefly, of the man at the desk, of the half-second his eyes had rested on her back when the itinerary went face down on the console. He noticed things. That was the danger, and it was also, she told herself, not her problem. Because noticing was not the same as choosing. And even if he noticed, he would file it where men like him filed everything. Behind the calm, behind the nothing, and go on to marry the surname his family expected. She set the thought down. It didn't help the schedule. The hair had swung across her face when the blow landed, and she used that now. She'd part it deeper, let the volume fall forward on the left, let the long dark waves and their run of caramel and gold do the work a scarf couldn't. She combed it through with her fingers, dropped the part off-center, coaxed the weight of it down over the cheekbone, and studied the result. From the aisle side she'd be clean, from the window side she'd have her hair. She would take the window. She reset the loose earring. She squared the collar of her blouse, tugged the line of the jacket straight at the hem, checked the crease of the tailored trousers, and the suit that had been chosen to look impeccable held, because it always held, because she had chosen it for exactly this, to be a woman no one could find a flaw in, even now, even with a bruise coming up under an inch of light. 9 minutes. She flushed the paper towel, capped the compact, zipped the pouch, slid it back into its slot. She wiped a splash from the marble edge of the sink so the next person would find it clean. She did not look at her eyes for longer than the job required, because her eyes were the one place the work hadn't reached, and she knew if she looked, she'd see the whole of it sitting there wet and waiting. So she kept her gaze on the tasks and let the tasks pull her toward the door. At the door, she stopped. She set her hand on the cold metal push bar and stood a moment with her weight against it, gathering, the way she gathered before every hard room. She ran the schedule once in her head, like a prayer she trusted more than prayer. Doors in 9. Mrs. Sterling front left, pillow deployed, pills at 10,000 feet. Mr. Sterling aft, third glasses, decaf on the climb. Victoria 2A. Mr. Kang, wherever Mr. Kang chose, herself beside Mrs. Sterling, window side, left cheek to the wall. Nothing had happened. That was the version she would carry onto the plane. Nothing had happened, and she had a job to do, and the job was the thing that was real. She pushed the bar and stepped out. The corridor was empty. The luggage cart had gone. She walked back the way she'd come, past the folded velvet rope, past the supply cart, to the side door that led onto the bridge, and she straightened her spine the last few steps before it, the way an actor squares off before the light hits. She came out onto the bridge, and the morning brightness off the tarmac caught her full in the face, and she did not flinch. The steward stood at the aircraft door with his hands folded. Somewhere behind her, back in the marble terminal, the man in the dark suit would be lifting the sheet Han Do-yoon had handed him, or setting it down, and she did not turn to find out. She had made a rule about not turning to find out. "We're on time," she told the steward, and her voice was her own again, the clear working voice that ran the whole operation, and he nodded and stepped aside. She went up the last of the bridge. At the threshold, Mrs. Sterling's voice reached her from the forward seat, warm and unbothered, asking whether they'd found the second bottle of the drops, and Camille said yes, front pocket, she'd have them for the descent, and the ordinary exchange closed over the last 2 minutes, like water over a dropped stone. She turned right at the door, toward the window seat, so her good side would face the cabin. She did not look at Victoria in 2A. She did not look for the dark suit that hadn't boarded yet. She did not look at anyone at all. She slid into the seat beside Mrs. Sterling, tucked the leather folder against her hip where the passports lived, let the curtain of her hair fall exactly where she'd built it to fall, and reached across to check that the old woman's belt was fastened low and flat the way she liked it. "You're cold," Mrs. Sterling said, taking her wrist. Your hands are like ice. The terminal runs the air too high, Camille said. Mrs. Sterling held the wrist a second longer than the words required, the way she'd held Camille's attention with a lifted brow when the itinerary was décarded, the way she noticed things she was too gracious to name. Then she let go and settled the neck pillow and closed her eyes, and Camille exhaled, slow, through the mouth, so it wouldn't show. The cabin door was still open. The bridge still connected them to the ground, to the corridor, to the room with the humming light where nothing had happened. Any moment the last passenger would come up it. Any moment the steward would reach for the handle and the ground would let go of them. Camille turned her face to the window and watched the tarmac shimmer and waited to leave the earth. One cheek to the wall, both hands folded, the sting under the makeup keeping its own quiet time, and she told herself the only thing she had left to tell herself. Nothing had happened. She almost believed it. The plane pushed back from the gate before it stopped. Camille felt the small lurch through the wall against her cheek, then the deeper hum of the engines, climbing to a pitch she knew by ear, and she waited for the tarmac to start sliding past her window. It did not slide. The engines held their note and then eased, a soft chime somewhere forward. She kept her eyes on the glass, on the fuel truck that should have been shrinking behind them and was still sitting exactly where it had been, a man in an orange vest walking away from it with a clipboard tucked under his arm. Mrs. Sterling stirred beside her. "Are we not going?" "A minute," Camille said. "They're checking something." She said it the way she said everything to Mrs. Sterling, low and certain, the voice of a woman who had never once been surprised by a plane. Inside, she counted. 90 seconds since the doors sealed. A holding pattern on the ground had a shape, and this one had the wrong shape. Push back, then stop, then the truck coming back. Up in 2A, Victoria turned in her seat. Her platinum hair caught the cabin light as she looked toward the cockpit, then back down the aisle, hunting for the reason. Her jaw set. She had a way of holding stillness that was not calm, but the effort to seem it. Camille had gone to the lavatory the moment she boarded, before Mrs. Sterling's belt, before anything. She had needed 40 seconds with the door locked and the fan running. She had pressed the heel of her hand under her eye and told the mirror the same sentence she had told the terminal glass. It had not held. The water in her lashes had stayed exactly where it was, brimming and refusing to fall, and she had come out with her chin level and sat down, and now she could not remember a single word she had said to the steward on the way. She was not going to be the reason a plane sat on the ground with 11 people in it. That was the one thing. A second chime. Footsteps in the aisle, unhurried. A weight to them she recognized before she placed it. The steward passed, then Han Do-yoon, then quiet again. Then his voice, forward, pitched for one person, Tae-jun. To the cockpit, 3 words she could not hear. The engines dropped another register. The plane was not taxiing. The plane was parked with its door still cracked to the bridge. Mr. Sterling's paper rustled behind her. Trouble? No, sir. Camille half rose to check his tray, the reflex to make herself useful, to move, to be the one solving instead of the one being solved. She got the tray latched, and the desk-aff noted for the climb that was not coming, and when she sat back down, her hands were in her lap, and there was nothing left in reach to fix. That was worse. She had built 4 years on always having the next thing in reach. You didn't drink your water, Mrs. Sterling said. I will. You said that on the bridge. Camille turned her face a half-inch toward the older woman and gave her the smile that worked on boardrooms and did not work here. Mrs. Sterling's eyes moved once across her face, left cheek to right, the way you scan a page for the line you dropped, and did not find it, and looked troubled that she had not. Forward, Victoria stood. She smoothed her dress with both palms and stepped into the aisle and said, "To no one and to everyone, why aren't we moving?" Han Do-yoon appeared at the front of the cabin and did not answer her. He was looking down the length of the plane, past Victoria, past the Sterlings, and his flat eyes settled for a moment on the window seat in the last row before he turned and spoke low to someone Camille could not see. She felt the look land. She did not lift her head to meet it. The murmur started the way murmurs do, small. Mr. Sterling asking his wife if she'd heard anything. The steward telling Victoria, with the careful blankness of a man following an order he did not understand, that Mr. Kang had asked to hold. Victoria's voice sharpening on the word hold, because holding was a decision, and a decision had an author, and she could not see one. Held for what? Victoria said. We have a slot. We'll lose the slot. He's aware, miss, the steward said. He's aware. Victoria let the two words sit, then sat back down hard, and Camille watched the back of that platinum head and understood that Victoria did not know either. Whatever this was, it had not come from her, for the length of one breath that was almost a comfort, and then it was the opposite, because if Victoria had not caused it, someone else had chosen it, and there was only one someone on this plane who could stop it. The engines idled. Somewhere under the floor a pump cycled and quit. Camille pressed her spine straight and made herself very small and very upright at once, the posture she wore into rooms full of men who had assumed the wrong thing about her, and she waited for the plane to give up its stillness and go. It did not go. His footsteps came down the aisle. She knew the count of them. She had catalogued his rhythms for 4 years the way other people learned a song. Even, unhurried, no drag on either foot, they passed 2A. Victoria half-turned and said his name, one syllable with a question folded into it, and the footsteps did not slow. They passed the Sterlings. Mr. Sterling lowered his paper an inch. They stopped at the last row. Camille kept her face to the window. In the glass, she could see him the way you see anyone in a window at night against a lit cabin. A dark shape edged in light, the line of the shoulders, the pale collar, and above the collar on the left side, the black shape she had stopped seeing years ago, because you stop seeing the things that are always there. He stood in the aisle, and he did not sit, and he did not speak. We're ready when the cabin's ready, Camille said to the window. Bright, level. I told them we could push in too. Look at me. 2 words. She had heard him give orders with fewer. She had heard him end negotiations with a nod. In 4 years, she had never once heard him ask for her face. She turned it to him. She had done the work in the terminal. The compact, the annular finger, the layers. The hair deepened at the part and combed forward over the left cheek, so the mass of it fell where the mark was. Under the cabin light, it was good work. It was the best work she could do with what she carried for Mrs. Sterling. But the mark was not the thing that gave her away, and she knew it the instant his eyes moved, because he did not look at her cheek at all. He looked at her eyes. She had kept the water there for 40 minutes by refusing it the smallest permission to move. She had held it through the boarding and the belt and the murmur and the weight. She held it now for 1 more second, jaw set, chin level, the whole architecture of 4 years bracing. Then he was looking at her, and the bracing was the thing that broke. Not the eyes, the bracing behind them. Her breath went out of her in a way she did not authorize, and one hot line ran down, and she caught it at the jaw with 2 fingers, fast, the way you catch a dropped glass, and it was already too late, because he had seen the whole of it before her hand moved. Something changed in his face. She had watched this man for 4 years, and could have drawn his stillness from memory. She knew the flat calm he wore into every room, the eyes that gave a negotiator nothing, the mouth that did not move when other men shouted. She knew the 3 nods he had spent in 4 years. She had built an entire private science out of the fact that Kang Tae-jun did not show what he felt, and she had told herself in the terminal mirror that this was exactly why she would never say a word to him, because a man who showed nothing chose nothing, and a man who chose nothing would always, in the end, choose the woman the family expected. His face was not still now. It happened underneath, the way a lake changes when the wind hits it. Nothing you could name, and everything moving at once. The line of his jaw shifted. Something went through the calm eyes and did not come back out the other side, and his shoulders, which she had never in 4 years seen do anything but hold, dropped a fraction, as if a weight had landed on them from the inside. "I'm fine," she said. The reflex, the 4-year reflex. "It's the cabin air, it's dry, Who hurt you?" The plane was very quiet. The engines idled somewhere far below the two of them. Up the aisle, a head turned, then another. Camille heard Mrs. Sterling's breath catch, small and sharp, the sound of a woman who has been waiting an hour for a thing to have a name, and has just been given it. Camille looked at him, and could not make the next word come. For 4 years she had been the one who had the answer ready. She had answered questions before they finished being asked, produced the passport before the hand went for the pocket, named the contract by its Thursday timestamp. She had 100 sentences for 100 rooms, and she reached for one now, and there was nothing on the shelf. His questions sat in the air between them, and it was the only question in the world that she had never prepared for, because in every version she had run in her head, in every terminal mirror, he did not ask it. He looked away. He chose comfort. He let the assistant carry the small cost to the closed place where she kept the others. He was not looking away. He had grounded a plane. She understood it all at once. The truck that came back, the slot Victoria was afraid of losing, the murmur, the hold with no author anyone could see. There was an author. He had reached forward into a schedule she had built, and he had stopped it, held 11 people on a runway, spent something a man like him did not spend, and he had done it before he knew a single fact, before there was a name, before there was a mark he could even see under the hair and the compact. He had done it because she had gone quiet. That was the thing that undid the last of it, not the question, the math behind the question. "It doesn't matter," she said, and her voice came out wrong, lower than she meant, roughened. "It's nothing that matters. The plane, please, the plane, will lose. We won't lose anything." He said it without turning his head, without raising his voice, the flat certainty she had heard him aim at men across tables, aimed now at the whole cabin, and meant for one person. "We go when I say." Behind him, up the aisle, Victoria had turned fully around in 2A. Camille could see the pale oval of her face over the seat back, the blue eyes moving fast between the two of them, doing their own math, and arriving somewhere that made the color leave under the tan. Victoria's mouth opened. Nothing came out of it. She had spent the whole boarding certain that whatever happened next, she would be the one narrating it. And she was watching a plane sit on a runway for a reason she had not chosen and could not steer. And she did not yet know how much she needed to be afraid, but her body had started without her. Camille saw it, filed it. Even now, even here, the part of her that catalogued kept working. Victoria stiffening. Mr. Sterling's paper lowered all the way to his knee. Mrs. Sterling's hand finding Camille's wrist again and holding it, warm this time. Deliberate, an old woman planting a flag. And Taejun, still standing, still waiting, because he had asked a question, and he was a man who, having asked, would stand in an aisle for an hour to be answered. Han Do-yoon had come halfway down the cabin and stopped. He stood with his hands loose at his sides and his flat eyes on the two of them, and he was not looking at Camille anymore. He was looking at his employer crouched in an aisle, reading the picture, and whatever conclusion moved behind that scarred brow he kept entirely to himself, the way he kept everything, though his gaze did travel once, briefly, up the aisle to the back of Victoria's platinum head, and rested there a beat longer than it needed to. Mr. Sterling set his paper on the empty seat beside him. He was a man who had spent 40 years reading rooms for the tell that told him who actually held the table, and he found it now, and his eyebrows went up a fraction, and he said nothing, and he watched. "He's never done this," Mrs. Sterling said, very softly, more to herself than to Camille, her fingers still warm around the younger woman's wrist. "In 4 years, he has never once been late for anything." She turned her head and looked at Camille's covered cheek, and then at Camille's eyes, and her own face did a slow, sad, certain thing. The thing a mother's face does when the answer arrives ahead of the words. "Oh," she said, "just that." She had understood before he had. Camille heard it. The one syllable landed somewhere under her ribs and stayed. Up front, Victoria's hand had found the armrest and closed on it, knuckles paling, and she was not saying his name anymore. Camille. He used the name. In 4 years he had used her name to summon her, to schedule her, never once like this, low, careful, set down between them, like something he did not want to drop. Who? She looked at the black serpent's head below his ear, and then at the 2 calm eyes that were not calm, and she felt 4 years of a rule she had written herself start to come apart at the seam. The rule had been simple. He never chose the assistant over the woman the family expected. She had believed it the way you believe the floor. She had built on it. She had walked into that terminal bathroom believing it, and she had walked out of it believing it, and she had carried it up the bridge and buckled Mrs. Sterling's belt believing it. A plane sat on a runway underneath the belief, and it would not move. "I need you to sit down," she said, one last time, the professional in her making its final stand, reaching past him toward the aisle, toward the schedule, toward the version of the morning where nothing had happened, and she took the small cost to the closed place, and everyone got where they were going on time. "Please, sit down and let them push, and I'll—" He crouched. He went down on his heel beside her seat so that his eyes came level with hers, so that she could not aim her answer past him at the cabin, so that there was only the small space between his face and hers, and the black shape at his collar, and the calm that had stopped being calm. He did not touch her. His hands stayed on his own knee, but he had put himself below her, this man, in front of the Sterlings, and the woman he had brought aboard, folded down into the aisle, at the seat of the help whose name Victoria had said did not matter on the plane, and he waited there with the whole cabin watching, and the engines idling, and 40 minutes of held water finally, quietly, running. "Tell me who," he said, "and I'll take care of the rest." Camille found the answer before he finished the sentence, and it was a lie. "It was a disagreement," she said, "between me and Miss Whitmore. I said something I shouldn't have. It got heated. I stepped over a line." Her voice held. 4 years of holding it had taught it how. She kept her eyes level with his, and she made the confession clean, because a clean confession would end this faster than a messy truth. End it and let them push, and let her keep the seat by the wall and the job that paid for her mother's apartment, and the 4 years she had built with her own 2 hands. Taejun stayed where he was, folded down in the aisle, knee under his palm. "A disagreement," he said. "Yes. You said something you shouldn't have. Yes." He looked at her for a long moment, not at the cheek, at the way her hands lay flat on her thighs, pressed there, too still, at the way she had answered a question about who with a story about what, at the geometry of it, the shape of a person stepping in front of another person the way you step in front of a car. "Camille," he said, and it was the second time in 4 years he had used her name for something that was not a schedule. "In 4 years, have you ever once told me a lie?" The cabin was very quiet. Even the engines seemed to hold. "No," she said. "You're not good at it." She felt the heat climb her throat, and she fought it down. "I'm telling you what happened. You're telling me a version." He shifted his weight, and the movement was small, and it put him no closer to her, but somehow, it closed the distance anyway. "You built the Sterling account. You catch a wrong passport before the steward knows he's holding it. You don't step over lines, you draw them." His head tilted a fraction. "So tell me who you're covering for, and why you think they're worth your face." She said nothing. Saying nothing was the only door left that did not open onto a fire. 2 rows up, Victoria had gone the color of the marble in the terminal. Her knuckles were white on the armrest, and she had stopped saying his name, and she was watching the back of Camille's head, the way a person watches a match burn down toward their fingers. Mrs. Sterling's hand was still on Camille's wrist, warm now and firm, and it tightened once, a small pressure that said the old woman had already done the arithmetic and arrived at the sum before her own son did. She looked at Taejun, and she did not say Victoria's name either. She only held the girl's wrist and let the silence do what silence does to a room full of people who all know the same thing and are all waiting to see who says it first. Nobody said it. Taejun rose. He rose the way he did everything, without haste, without noise, and the whole cabin adjusted to the fact of him standing the way water adjusts to a stone. He did not raise his voice. He did not turn toward seat 2A. He turned toward the front of the cabin, where Han Do-yoon stood with his hands folded and his eyes flat and reading everything. Do-yoon. The chief of security crossed to him in 4 steps. Taejun spoke to him low, 3 sentences, maybe 4, and no one else in the cabin caught a word of it. But Camille watched Han Do-yoon's eyes move once, from Taejun's face, to Camille's covered cheek, to the door of the aircraft, to the bridge beyond it that still connected them to the terminal they had not yet left, and she understood, with a cold drop in her stomach, that the man was not being told to sit down. He was being sent back. Han Do-yoon nodded, the small economical nod she had catalogued for 4 years, and he turned and went to the door and spoke to the steward, and the steward, who had been holding the aircraft closed against every instinct a flight crew has, opened it the rest of the way onto the bridge. "We're not going," Victoria said. Her voice had found itself again, and it came out sharp and bright and wrong. "Taejun, we are going to lose the slot. Whatever this is, it can be sorted in the air." She said herself it was nothing. She said it was a disagreement. He looked at her then. It was the first time since he had come down the aisle that he had looked at her at all, and Camille watched Victoria feel the difference between being looked at and being seen. "Sit down, Victoria," he said. "Not cruel, worse than cruel. Even." Victoria sat. He came back down the aisle and he stopped again at Camille's row, but he did not fold himself down this time. He stood, one hand loose on the seat back, and he spoke so that only she and the old woman beside her could hear him. "I'm not asking you to name anyone," he said. "You've decided you won't, and I'm not going to stand in this aisle and break a thing you've decided. That's yours." His jaw moved. "But you're going to let me be wrong on my own then, not on yours. You gave me a version to protect me from a decision. I don't need protecting. Take the version back." "I can't," she said, and it came out smaller than she meant it to. "Why?" "Because if I take it back, I don't have a job by the time we land." The truth got out before she could stop it, and it horrified her, and she pressed her lips together too late. "And you'll ask me to prove it, and it'll be my word, and I'm the one who carries the bags." Something crossed his face. It was not anger. She had braced for anger, had built her whole silence around the certainty of it, the certainty that a man like him, told his companion of however many months had put a hand on his assistant, would either explode or refuse to believe it, and either way the assistant would be the thing that got thrown off to make the plane light enough to fly. She had written that rule herself. She had lived inside it for 4 years. But the thing that crossed his face was not anger. It was something closer to injury, quickly covered, the look of a man who has just learned exactly how little the person he trusts most believes he would stand up for her. "Is that what you think of me?" he said, quietly. Not a question either. She did not answer. Her eyes answered. 4 years of answers were in them. 4 years of never once checking whether he had seen her humiliated, of teaching herself not to hope he would choose the dignity of the help over the comfort of the woman he brought aboard, of writing that lesson into herself so deep it had become a fact, like the temperature of his father's coffee, like the timestamp on a Thursday contract. He straightened. He looked, for the length of one breath, older than 36. "All right," he said, "then I'll show you what I think of me." He did not explain it. He turned and walked back up the aisle toward the front, and Camille, who read him for a living, could not read what he meant, and the not reading was its own kind of vertigo. At the front, Mi-suk rose from her seat. Camille had almost forgotten her, the mother, quiet in the second row on the other side, a woman in soft gray with pearls at her ears and a coil of silver-threaded hair, who had said not one word through any of it. She had been watching. She had been watching the way a woman watches her son, which is a different watching than anyone else in the world is capable of, and she had seen the one thing none of the others could have known to look for. She had seen him leave. She had watched her son, who did not abandon a schedule, who had not been late to a single thing in the years she had known him to run his own life, hold an aircraft on the ground and walk to the back of it and fold himself down in an aisle at the feet of a woman who carried the luggage, and she had understood the whole of it in that gesture, before a single fact was on the table, before the cameras, before the accusation, before any of it. A mother reads a son the way that son reads his assistant, without words, faster than words. She had the answer the moment his knee touched the floor. She crossed to him now and put her hand on his arm and spoke to him in Korean, low, 3 words, and Camille did not need the language to understand the shape of them. Not a question, a confirmation, the mother telling the son the thing the son was only now, painfully, arriving at. Taejun's eyes closed for half a second. When they opened, something in him had set, like a bone going back into a socket. "Nay," he said to his mother. "Yes." Mrs. Sterling, beside Camille, let out a breath she had been holding, and patted Camille's wrist twice, and said, very softly, so only the girl could hear, "He knows, dear. He's known since he stood up. He's just deciding how to be careful about it." She smiled, thin and old and shrewd. "He's a careful man. It's the best and the worst thing about him. He's going to fire me," Camille whispered. It was the only conclusion her 4 years had left room for. "No," said Mrs. Sterling. "He's going to be very, very slow and very quiet, and by the time you understand what he's doing, it will already be done." She squeezed once more. "You're not the only one on this plane who learned to hide what they feel until they were sure. You just happen to be the 2 worst cases I've ever met." Up the aisle, Taejun was speaking to Han Do-yoon again, at the door, and the security chief had one foot already on the bridge. Whatever the instruction was, it was short. Do-yoon repeated a single word back. A location, a place. Camille thought she caught the shape of corridor, of the direction they had all come from, the direction of the private washrooms and the cold hallway that smelled of bleach. And then he was gone, back up the bridge and into the terminal, moving fast for a man who never moved fast, and the door stayed open behind him with the morning light coming pale through it. Victoria turned in her seat to watch him go. Camille saw the exact moment the calculation began behind her eyes, saw her track Han Do-yoon's path back toward the terminal, back toward the hallway, back toward the one place there had been no one but the 2 of them, and the sound of a slap and the scuff of a hip against marble. Saw the blood leave her face a second time, differently now. The first time she had been afraid of a plane that would not move. This time she was afraid of something with a memory. "What did you send him for?" Victoria said, loud enough for the cabin, trying to make it sound like irritation. "For the truth," Taejun said. He did not raise his voice to match hers. He lowered his, and she had to stop talking to hear him, and that was the point. "You keep telling me it was nothing, a disagreement, words in a hallway." He came a step down the aisle toward her. I believe you that it happened in a hallway. Victoria's mouth opened and found nothing in it. The terminal has cameras, he said, gently, as if telling her the weather. The hallway to the washrooms has cameras. They don't get flustered. They don't lose their nerve when someone with a good last name raises their voice. He let that sit. So we'll wait. It's 4 minutes to pull the footage and 4 minutes to bring it here, and we have the plane as long as I want the plane, and I find I want it a while longer. He turned before she could answer and came back down the aisle, and this time, when he reached Camille's row, he crouched again, and this time he was not asking her for a name. You don't have to say a word, he told her. You never did. I asked you who, and that was my mistake. I made you responsible for saying it, when I already knew. His voice dropped under the sound of the engines. I've known you 4 years. I have never once had to check your work. Did you really think the one time I'd stop trusting you would be the time your hands were like ice, and you couldn't look at your own eyes in a mirror? Camille's composure, which had survived the terminal, and the washroom, and the slap, and the slow walk down the bridge, and the seat by the wall, and every single second since, chose that moment to fail. Not loudly. One breath went ragged. She turned her face a fraction toward the window, the old reflex, the covered cheek to the glass. Don't, he said, not a command, almost a request. Not from me. You've hidden it from everyone else. You don't have to hide it from me. She stayed turned to the window, but her hand, the one Mrs. Sterling was not holding, came off her thigh and pressed flat against the cool wall of the cabin, and it was shaking, and she let it shake, and that was as much surrender as 4 years would allow her in one morning. Taejun watched the shaking hand and did not touch it. He put his own hand on the seat back again, close to hers, not close enough to be a thing anyone could name, and he stayed crouched there in the aisle of a held aircraft with the door open to the light and his mother's eyes on his back, and Victoria's version already dying somewhere in a hallway camera 4 minutes away, and he waited with her, the way she had spent 4 years waiting on everyone else, and never once been waited for. Whatever's on that footage, he said, when Do-yoon brings it back, I want you to understand something before you see it. She turned her head enough to see him from the corner of her eye. I'm not pulling it to find out if you're telling the truth, he said. I already know you are. I'm pulling it so that when I do what I'm going to do, no one in this cabin, or in my family, or in her family, can ever say I did it on the word of the woman who carries the bags. His jaw set. I'm doing it so it isn't your word, so it's just what happened, so you never have to defend it again. Camille closed her eyes. 4 years she had run the numbers on this man, and every equation had ended the same place. That when the day came, and it always came, he would choose the comfort of the woman he'd brought over the dignity of the woman he employed, because that was how the world was built, and she had stopped expecting the world to be built any other way. She had been so certain. She had been so sure of the rule that she had missed the one variable she had never let herself enter, that a man who reads you without words, for 4 years, without ever once checking your work, is also a man who knows, without being told, exactly whose word to make sure it never comes down to. The engines idled, the door stood open on the light, and down the pale length of the bridge, Han Do-yoon was already coming back, and he was not empty-handed. Victoria was on her feet before Han Do-yoon reached the top of the bridge. She did it fast, the way a person moves when they have decided the next minute belongs to them. She stepped into the aisle. She put her body between Taejun and the open door, and she smiled at the cabin, like a woman about to correct a misunderstanding for everyone's benefit. Before that man says a word, she said, someone in here should hear the truth from me. The cabin went still in a new way, not the held breath of before, something colder. Taejun stayed where he was, half crouched at Camille's seat, one hand still on his own knee. He turned his head toward Victoria without hurry. He said nothing. He was letting her walk. Camille felt it start in her stomach. She knew this voice. She had heard it in the terminal an hour ago, over the itinerary, over the contract, the bright one, the one built for an audience. I didn't want to do this, Victoria said. She pressed a hand flat to her chest. I have protected this girl for months. I have covered for her, and I told myself, don't embarrass her in front of the Kangs. But now there's talk of footage and cameras and holding a private jet on a runway, and I won't be made the villain of a story I didn't write. Victoria, Taejun's voice was even. Sit down. No. She turned to his mother. She turned to the Sterlings. She chose her jury. No, I've been sitting quietly while she rearranges the whole morning around her feelings. Ask her what happened in that bathroom. Ask her who followed who. Mrs. Sterling's hand tightened on Camille's wrist. Camille said nothing. She had spent 4 years learning that the fastest way to lose was to answer a performance in real time. But Victoria wasn't finished. She had only started. She followed me, Victoria said. I went to fix my face before the flight, and she came in after me, and she said things, personal things, about Taejun. She let the name land soft, intimate, wrong. Do you want me to repeat them in front of his parents? I didn't touch her. She got herself worked up. She caught her own face on the counter. And now there are cameras. And suddenly, I'm the monster. It was so clean. That was the thing that took the air out of Camille. It was so clean and so exact, and it used every true detail, the bathroom, the counter, the face, and turned each one a 1/4 inch until the whole shape pointed the other way. That's not what happened, Camille said. Quiet, level. It was the first thing she had said aloud in minutes, and her own voice sounded far off. Of course you'd say that. Victoria didn't even look angry. She looked patient. That was worse. You've said it in your head so many times you believe it. Han Do-yoon had reached the doorway. He stopped there, on the threshold, a slim, dark tablet held flat against his side, and he read the cabin in one pass, the way he read everything. He did not come forward. He waited for a look from Taejun that had not yet come. Camille saw the tablet. She understood what it was. And in the place where relief should have been, there was only a fresh drop of the floor beneath her, because she also understood what came next if she was wrong about a single second of the timing, a single frame, a single angle that hadn't caught the hall. Victoria saw it too, and instead of paling this time, she leaned into it. Good, she said. Play it, please. Let's all watch a woman work herself up over a man who isn't hers, and never will be. She turned to Camille, and her voice dropped, almost gentle, almost kind, and that was the cruelest register she owned. That's what this is really about, isn't it? 4 years, carrying his files, learning his coffee, memorizing his mother's pills. You didn't build a career, you built a way to stand next to him. The cabin was very quiet. You've been in love with him for years, Victoria said. Everyone in this cabin can see it, except him. And there it was. The floor Camille had been standing on since the terminal, the last narrow ledge of it, the one thing she had held, that she was a professional, that her work was hers, that 4 years meant a system and a trust and a name she had earned. Victoria reached out with one sentence and took it. Not the job she had already braced to lose. This was the other thing. This was the accusation you could not disprove by being good at your work, because it turned being good at your work into the proof. Camille felt her face go hot and hated it, because the heat looked like exactly what Victoria had just named it. Mrs. Sterling started to speak. Victoria, that is. I'm not talking to you, Victoria said, sweet, and Mrs. Sterling's mouth closed in surprise. And for 1 second, even Camille could see how someone might mistake this woman for someone who was winning. Mi-suk had not moved from where she stood near the front of the cabin. Her hand had left her son's arm. She watched Victoria, the way a person watches weather come in over a field they have farmed for 40 years, already knowing what it will do to the crop, and already knowing it will pass. She said nothing. Her stillness had weight. Taejun rose from the crouch, slowly, to his full height. He was between Camille and Victoria now, and Camille could only see the back of him, the dark line of his shoulders, and she could not read what was on his face, and the old rule came roaring back up out of her chest with all its teeth. He will not choose the woman who carries the bags. She had written that rule, she had lived by it for 4 years, and in this exact second, watching his back, unable to see his eyes, with Victoria's voice still hanging in the air, and his parents watching, and Han in the doorway, with the proof held against his hip, like something that could just as easily bury her. In this second, she believed it completely. So Camille did the only thing left that was hers to do. She let go of Mrs. Sterling's hand, gently. She unclipped her own seatbelt. The small click was loud. "I'd like to say something," she said. Taejun turned. "Camille, please." She looked at him, and then made herself look away from him, because looking at him was the thing that had gotten her called what she had just been called. She looked at Mrs. Sterling, at Mr. Sterling behind, at Mi-suk. She chose her own jury now, and she gave them the only testimony she thought could still save one thing out of the wreck. "Miss Whitmore is right about one part," Camille said. The words cost her something visible. Her hands were folded in her lap to keep them still. "I have never had an intention toward Mr. Kang, in 4 years, not once. I have never wanted anything from him except to do my job well enough that he never had to think about it." Her voice held. She made it hold. "Whatever anyone saw on my face this morning, it was not that. I would resign before I let it be that." "Camille?" Taejun's voice had changed. Low, something under it she couldn't name and refused to hope was there. "I think that's what I should do," she said, still not to him, to the cabin, to the space above their heads. "When we land, I'll transition the Sterling account properly. 2 weeks, everything documented. Mrs. Sterling's medication schedule is in the blue folder. The drops are the second bottle, front pocket, for the descent." Her throat closed on that and she pushed through it. "It's better. For everyone. It's better if I'm not standing next to anyone." She had recast herself. She heard herself do it. To keep the one thing Victoria could not take, the truth that she had never wanted him, she had just agreed, out loud, in front of his family, to be exactly the small, interested woman Victoria had drawn. She had traded her whole 4 years for the right to say, "I never wanted him," and the price of that sentence was every other thing she had ever been in this account. That was the bottom. She felt it arrive. Not a crash, a quiet settling, the way water finds the lowest part of a floor and stops. She thought of the 5 o'clock alarm that morning, the mother's pills sorted Sunday through Saturday in the little box, the extra reading glasses, the still water, the neck pillow. 4 years of small exact things nobody was ever supposed to notice, and she had just fed all of them into Victoria's sentence with her own hand, because the only way she knew to answer the word "interested" was to strip herself of every reason she'd ever had to stay. She heard how it sounded. A woman who memorized a man's whole life and swore she'd never wanted a thing from him, said out loud. It did not sound like innocence. It sounded like exactly what Victoria had called it, and she had said it anyway, because the alternative was to stand in this cabin and let the room decide, and she had never in her life let a room decide anything about her. Victoria exhaled. It was almost tender, the sound of a woman whose morning had just been handed back to her. "There," she said softly. "Was that so hard?" Mr. Sterling folded his newspaper. All the way, he set it on the empty seat beside him, and he looked at Victoria over the top of his glasses, and he did not say anything, but he took the paper's absence and made it a statement. Camille saw it and could not even take comfort from it. She was past comfort. Mrs. Sterling's eyes had filled. "Sweetheart, no," she whispered. "Don't you do that. Don't you dare hand her that." "It's already done," Camille said, and it was the truest thing she'd said all morning, because it felt done. It felt like a door closing on a room she'd built with her own hands. She reached for the leather folder in the seat pocket. Her hands knew the motion even now. Inside the second tab, behind the retouch pouch, was Victoria's passport, still under her custody, the small last absurdity of it. She was still, in this moment, carrying the woman's documents. She drew the folder onto her lap and opened it and started, out of 4 years of reflex, to organize the handover she had just announced. That was when Taejun crossed to her seat. He did not raise his voice. He did not look at Victoria. He crouched again, level with her, the way he had before, and he put 2 fingers flat on the closed folder in her lap, not taking it, stopping it. "Look at me," he said. 3rd time. In 4 years he had asked it never, and this morning 3 times. She looked. She had nothing left to guard the look with. "You will not resign," he said. "Quiet. Absolute. And you will not stand there and tell my mother what you never wanted, to save yourself from a lie." "Taejun," Victoria's voice sharpened. She just admitted. She admitted nothing. He still had not turned toward Victoria. He kept his eyes on Camille, and he spoke to Camille, and he let Victoria hear it from the side. "She is doing the same thing she did on the ground when I asked who hurt her. She is falling on the knife so no one else has to. She has done it all morning. She would do it now until there was nothing left of her, and every person in this cabin who let her would be a coward." Camille's breath caught. "I let you take the blame once today," he said. "I let you carry a version to protect yourself, because I thought you needed the door. I was wrong to let it. I will not be wrong twice." "You're taking her side," Victoria said, and her voice had finally lost the brightness, the platform under it starting to tilt. "In front of your parents, over an assistant, because she cried." Taejun rose, and now he turned. He did not answer Victoria yet. Camille watched him not answer her, watched him hold the pause, and understood, dimly, through the ringing in her own head, that whatever he was about to do, he was going to do slowly, and completely, and once. He looked at Han Do-yoon in the doorway. He looked at the slim dark tablet against Han's hip, and he held out his hand for it, palm up, without a word. Han crossed the cabin. Every eye followed the tablet. Victoria's face did the thing it had not done since the ground. The color went, all at once, from the top down, and her hand found the back of seat 2A and closed on it, knuckles white, the body afraid ahead of the woman again. Camille sat with the folder open on her lap, the passport under her fingers, and could not make herself hope. She had just spent the last of her hope buying a sentence. There was nothing in her to lift. Taejun took the tablet. He did not look at it. He held it flat in one hand, screen dark, and he looked at Victoria across the length of the cabin, and he said, in the evenest voice he owned, the voice he used for schedules and departures, and things that were simply going to happen, "You wanted it played." Victoria said nothing. "You stood in front of my mother," Taejun said, "and you asked me to play it." The tablet stayed dark in his hand. He was not playing it. He was letting the not playing of it fill the whole cabin, letting Victoria feel every second she had spent daring him to, and Camille watched Victoria's face and saw the exact instant the woman understood she had built the last hour on the assumption that the hallway had been empty. "Han," Taejun said, still not looking away from Victoria, his thumb resting on the dark glass. "How long is it?" 4 minutes, sir," Han's flat voice. "The corridor and the terminal, both angles, time-stamped." "And does it show what she said?" Taejun tilted his head a fraction toward Victoria. "That the assistant followed her, that the assistant caught her own face on the counter. Han Do-yoon looked at Camille for 1 second, not unkindly, a soldier confirming a position, and then back to Taejun. "No, sir," he said. "It does not." The cabin held its breath. Victoria's mouth opened, closed. She looked at the tablet, then at Taejun's thumb resting on it, unmoving, and Camille watched the whole architecture of the morning start to come apart behind the woman's eyes. The terminal, the contract, the itinerary, the bathroom, the sentence. "You made me do that." Every clean quarter turn she had made, all of it sitting somewhere on 4 minutes of time-stamped glass that had not once looked away. "Play it," Victoria said. "It came out wrong. Too fast. Play it then, if you're so." "No," Taejun said. He lowered the tablet to his side. "Not here." He looked at his mother, and something passed between them, brief, and Mi-suk gave the smallest nod, the nod of a woman who had known the shape of this since the runway. "Not in front of the people you tried to use as your audience. You do not get to make them watch, the way you made them watch her." He turned to the cabin, to the pilot's door, to the open bridge and the light beyond it. "We're not flying today," he said, calm, final. "Reset the schedule. Everyone goes to the house." And then, to Han, low, 3 words the whole cabin heard, because the cabin had gone that quiet. "Bring the footage." Camille sat very still with a stranger's passport under her fingers, and the wreck of her own resignation still hanging in the air where she'd left it, and she could not tell, yet, whether the floor she had hit was going to hold her or open one more time, because the tablet was dark, and the version she had signed against herself was already spoken, and the only thing anyone in that cabin knew for certain was that whatever was on those 4 minutes, nobody had watched it yet. The cars were already waiting when they came down the stairs onto the tarmac, 3 of them, engines running, a driver holding each rear door. Han Do-yoon walked ahead of the group with the tablet held flat against his thigh, screen down, and Camille understood, without being told, that the 4 minutes had not gone anywhere. They had only changed rooms. She carried the leather folder against her chest. Victoria's passport was still inside it. Nobody had asked for it back, and she had not offered. Taejun put his mother in the first car. He put the Sterlings in the second, Mrs. Sterling reaching once for Camille's sleeve and missing. He held the door of the third himself and looked at Camille and then at Victoria, and he said, "Both of you," and neither of them argued, because arguing now meant staying on the tarmac alone. The drive to the house took 11 minutes. Nobody counted them out loud. Victoria sat by the far window, with her arms crossed under her chest and her chin up, rebuilding something behind her face. Camille watched her do it. She watched the woman decide, somewhere around the 3rd traffic light, that she had not lost yet, that a dark screen was not a played screen, that the only thing anyone had actually seen this morning was a crying assistant and a man who bent down for her. "You're very quiet," Victoria said to the window. "You were louder on the plane." Camille held the folder and said nothing. The house sat behind a wall, the color of bone. The gate opened before the first car reached it. Han was already out and standing on the gravel by the time the 3rd car stopped, and he had the tablet, and he was waiting for a look from Taejun that had not come yet. Inside, the front room was wide and pale, and full of the kind of quiet that expensive floors make. Mi-suk took a seat near the window without being asked. Seok-jin was there, the father, waiting, gray at the temples, jade on one finger, and he rose when his wife entered, and did not sit again. Mrs. Sterling was guided to a chair. Mr. Sterling stood behind it, with one hand on the back of it. Victoria walked into the center of the room, like she had chosen it. "Well," she said, brightly, to the assembled family, "now that we're all somewhere civilized." Taejun did not go to the center of the room. He stopped near the door, where Han stood, and he put out his hand, palm up, the same gesture he had made on the plane, and this time, Han did not hesitate. The tablet woke when Taejun touched it. "Victoria," he said, "you asked me to play it." The color moved down her face the way it had on the plane, top to bottom, forehead to jaw. But she held. "In front of your mother," she said, and turned to Mi-suk, warm, reaching. "He's going to show you security footage of a private argument between two women, and call it..." "Han," Taejun said. Han crossed to the long table by the window and set the tablet upright against a stack of books so the screen faced the room. He tapped it twice. There was no sound. The footage never had sound. The corridor cameras were cheap that way, but it had a timestamp burning in the corner, white numbers ticking, and it had the corridor, the pale corridor outside the terminal restrooms, the one everybody in that plane had already heard named twice. It showed Victoria pushing the door open and holding it. It showed Camille following. Camille looked away from the screen. She looked at the floor between her own shoes, because she had lived this once already, and did not want to watch herself walk into it a second time. But the room was not looking at her. The room was looking at the numbers in the corner and the two figures inside the frame, and she could hear the exact second the story turned, because Seokjin made a sound in his throat, low, and Mrs. Sterling said, "Oh no," very softly, and did not say anything else. On the second angle, the terminal camera caught the doorway. It caught the door swing. It caught, framed clean in the gap before the door fell shut, the arm come up and across. Nobody in the room needed the sound. Mi-suk rose from her chair. She did not hurry. She crossed to the table and she stood in front of the tablet with her back very straight, and she watched the last of it, the part where Camille's hip caught the marble, and her hair fell forward, and she did not go down. And then she reached out one finger and stopped the playback herself, on the frame where Victoria was already stepping back from her own hand. The room held that frame. Victoria, on the screen, staring at her own fingers. "Turn it off," Victoria said. Nobody turned it off. That's edited, that's out of context, you can make anything look. "It has a timestamp," Mr. Sterling said, from behind his wife's chair, in the voice of a man who had read 10,000 contracts and knew what a timestamp was worth. "And two angles." "Camille is just an assistant," Victoria said it fast, the way a person grabs the nearest solid thing falling. She said it to the room, to the parents, to Mi-suk's straight back. "She works for him. She carries the bags. You're all going to stand here and..." "She works for me," Taejun said. He had not raised his voice once. He did not raise it now. He set the tablet flat on the table, screen down again, the way Han had carried it, and he turned and looked at Victoria across the pale room, and the thing in his face was not fury. Camille had catalogued that face for 4 years. It was not fury. It was a door closing at its own weight. "She works for me," he said again. "That never gave you the right to treat her as someone lesser than you." The silence after it had a shape. Victoria opened her mouth. She looked for the family, for a face that would hold her, and found Mi-suk's back and Seokjin's flat stare and the Sterling's turn to stone, and she found, last, Han Do-yoon already moving, not toward her, but toward the front door, where 2 matched suitcases in cream leather now stood on the step outside, brought around while the footage played, set down in the gravel light. Victoria saw the suitcases through the open door. "You're joking," she said. "The car will take you wherever you'd like," Taejun said. "Not to the plane. We're not on the plane anymore." For 1 second, the ensemble came apart. The raised chin, the rebuilt face, all of it. What was under it was not sorrow. Camille watched closely because she wanted to be sure, later, of what she had seen, and what she saw was calculation running out of road. Victoria had not been ashamed on the plane, and she was not ashamed now. She was only, finally, without an audience willing to hold her. She walked to the door. She stopped at it. She turned, and she found Camille's eyes for the first time since the restroom, and whatever she meant to leave there she could not make land, because Camille only looked back at her, level, the leather folder against her chest, and said nothing at all. Victoria went out to the suitcases. The car door shut. The gravel turned under the tires. Then the room let its breath go, all at once, in small movements. Mrs. Sterling's hand to her mouth, Seokjin sitting at last, Misuk turning from the table with her eyes wet and fierce, and finding her son, and holding him with a look that needed no Korean. Seokjin spoke first, and only once. He looked at the frozen tablet, then at his son, and said something short and low in Korean. Misuk answered him without turning. Whatever passed between them, Camille could not follow the words, but she could follow the weight. The father had asked, the mother had confirmed, and neither of them was going to pretend a hand across a face was a private argument between two women. Seokjin looked at Camille for a long moment. He inclined his head half an inch. In that house, from that man, it was an entire sentence, and Camille understood she had just been counted among the people who mattered. Camille set the folder down on the nearest surface. Her hands had started to shake, and she did not want to be holding anything when they did. "I'm sorry," she said. The room turned to her. "For all of it," she said. "For the plane, for making you hold it on the ground. For the slot, the schedule, the 4 years of managing every cost had left her with only one reflex, and it was to apologize for the disruption, to reach for the itinerary even now. I should have just... Camille, Taejun crossed the room to her. Stop apologizing for her. I'm not. You are. He stopped an arm's length away. You've been apologizing for her since the terminal. You covered the mark. You changed your part so the hair would fall over it. You got on the plane and told everyone the cabin air was cold. He said each one like he was setting a stone down. You did all of that so no one would have to be uncomfortable, including her. Mrs. Sterling made a small sound that was almost a laugh and almost not. She destroyed it herself, Taejun said. Not you. The second she raised her hand in that corridor, there was nothing left to save. You didn't take anything from her. She showed everyone who she was, and I believed her. Camille's throat worked. You held a plane, she said. You held a plane on the ground for you. Yes. The word sat in the pale room and Camille did not know where to put it. She had written a rule 4 years ago and lived inside it so long she had stopped seeing the walls. He will never choose the one who carries the bags. She had built it to keep herself safe and it had made her small, and now the man who had never once checked her work had just torn it down in front of both their families, and she could not make her body believe it. I'll still transition the account, she said, because she needed something true and procedural to stand on. 2 weeks. It's all documented. I don't want anyone thinking. You're not resigning. Thinking I stayed because... Camille. The gate intercom buzzed. Han moved to it. A voice came through it, thinned by the speaker, and Camille knew it before Han turned around, because some people cannot leave a room without needing the last word from the driveway. Victoria had come back. She stood on the far side of the gate on the little screen, arms crossed, one heel tapping. I left my passport, she said, through the box. Your assistant has my passport. I'm not going anywhere without it. And it was true. Camille reached for the folder on instinct, the second flap, behind the retouch pouch, exactly where it had ridden since the terminal, and drew the passport out, this small blue proof that she had done her job right down to the last minute of the worst morning of her life, that she had guarded even the document of the woman who hit her. She held it out toward Han to carry to the gate. Taejun took it from her hand instead. He looked at it a moment, the passport, the name, Whitmore in gold, and then he looked at Camille, and something in him seemed to decide that the morning had used up every word it was going to get, that he could stand in this room and be right and reasonable and correct forever, and it would not undo 4 years of a woman believing she was less than she was. He set the passport on the table. He would have Han take it out. Later. Then he closed the last of the distance between them, and he put one hand at the side of Camille's face, the right side, the side that had never been touched, and he kissed her. It was brief. It was not careful, but it was brief, the way a thing is brief when a man has been holding it for a very long time and finally sets it down. Camille's eyes were open for the first half second, and then they were not. Somewhere by the window, Mrs. Sterling made her almost laugh again, wetter now. On the gate screen, the small figure of Victoria went still, and then the tapping heel stopped, and then she turned and walked back to the waiting car, and this time the gravel did not turn slowly. This time it left. Taejun stepped back. Camille stood with her hand half raised, not quite touching her own mouth. She had jured herself 2 hours ago in a plane and sworn on her name that in 4 years she had never wanted this, never once, and she had meant it as far as she had ever let herself look, and the ground was gone from under that too, now, and she found she was not sorry. She had built her whole life on knowing what came next, and she did not know what came next. In 4 years you never, nothing ever. No, he agreed, nothing ever. Why did you do that? He looked at her. The angular face that had given her 3 nods in 4 years and 1 changed expression this whole morning. Han had gone very carefully to studying the far wall. Mi-suk had turned back to the window with the ghost of something on her mouth. The house waited. Taejun hesitated, the first hesitation Camille had ever seen in him, a half second where the calm ran out and something underneath it showed through, and then he told the truth, because he was, she would learn, a man who dealt in the truth even when it cost him. Because I already wanted to, he said. And there it was, not new. That was the part that took the floor out from under her all over again. That's already. Not since the plane, not since the corridor. Already, and for how long she did not know, and she watched him not tell her how long, watched him fold it back down inside himself, the way he folded everything, and she understood that she had spent 4 years reading a man who had spent the same 4 years letting himself be read in everything except this. How long, she said, not a question. The way he had said things to her all morning. He picked the passport back up off the table and handed it to Han without looking away from her. Take that to the gate, he told Han, and to Camille, quieter, only for her. That's a longer conversation. Outside, the last car was gone. Inside, Mrs. Sterling was already saying something warm and unstoppable to Mi-suk, and Mr. Sterling had picked up his folded paper and set it down again unread, and the pale room had somehow become a room where people lived, instead of a room where a woman had been put on trial. Camille stood in the middle of it with her hands finally still. She had walked into a restroom that morning, certain of exactly one thing, that a woman who carries the bags does not get chosen over the one the family expects. She had been right about the rule and wrong about the man, and she did not yet know which of those was going to be harder to live with. Because if it had never started as love, if for 4 years there had been nothing, not a word, not a look she could have sworn to, then there was only one question left worth asking, and she could see it sitting in his face, where he was already deciding not to answer it yet. Why could neither of them forget a thing that had never once happened? And how long, exactly, had he been carrying it? If you want to watch all the stories without any ads and also get access to bonus scenes, extended epilogues, and exclusive spicy chapters, head over to our Patreon. Scan the QR code on the screen. The link is in the description or in the pinned comment. See you there. If this story moved you, stop for a moment and reflect. Have you ever given 4 years of quiet, flawless loyalty to someone, only to be treated as invisible by the people around them? When someone tried to shrink you into the help, did you find the courage to speak your own worth out loud? And when the truth finally surfaced, did the right person choose to see you? Tell us your experiences and feelings in the comments. We read them all. And if you believe in stories about dignity, loyalty, and hidden truth, leave a like, be sure to subscribe to the channel, and click join to become a part of our community and help the channel.